morning, good afternoon, all of our friends at Partnerize. My name is Julie Van Ullen, and I'm the Chief Revenue Officer here at Rakuten Rewards. Really excited to have the opportunity to talk with you about what we're seeing in terms of data and what some of our predictions are in terms of the upcoming holiday shopping season. And the intention of today's webinar is simply to ensure that we're sharing as much data with you as humanly possible to help you make your retailers and brands as successful as they can be this holiday. As we all know, every year has been something new for the last 4 or 5 years, and we fundamentally believe that it is our responsibility to be as informative as possible and help our partners like yourselves as much as we can by sharing our first party and proprietary data that kind of sets you up to know what a successful Q4 might look like for your brands, especially by category. So with that, I'm excited to jump in today and first start talking a little bit about some of the key themes that we've been seeing largely all year, but the 3 key themes that will play into the consumer mindset as we go into this holiday shopping season. The first one is uncertainty. And we've been uncertain for a while, I would say, and none of you would disagree, I'm sure. But this year is politically interesting as well, on top of there being ongoing economic and social turbulence, which is creating some interesting concerns and predictions on behalf of the consumer landscape that we'll go through in a little bit and talk you through what that might mean for their actual shopping behavior. The second thing is around variability. What we've been finding all year so far that we believe is going to continue to be an important trend going into the back half of this year is that as we have a very competitive Q4 coming for a variety of reasons, which again, we will discuss, sometimes it isn't always the lowest price or the highest cash back rate that wins the day. Sometimes it's really about creating these surprise and delight moments and fluctuating cash back, for instance, such that the consumer doesn't always see the same offer or the same creative and is really lured in on a regular basis around what sorts of offers and value your retailers may be offering. And the final one is specifically about value. Again, during any time of uncertainty, we're going to see consumers clutch their wallets a lot harder. Rakuten always sees more shopping, increased shopping behavior on election years. And this year seems to be even more so because not only do we have the uncertainty of the political landscape, but also ongoing challenges around inflation, around strikes and whatnot that have consumers in general very focused on when they believe that they're going to get the most value. And again, value is not rooted in price alone. So we know that retail sales have continued to grow despite kind of some categorical headwinds, right? No matter what has happened over the last few years, we've kind of continued to grow and grow from a retail sales standpoint, which is a very exciting moment to be in, especially as we go into our Super Bowl of the year, if you will. So that really shows you that consumers are certainly spending, but the question is how and what are they concerned about and how will that impact where they're spending their dollars and when they're spending their dollars. So the first thing is that there have been some unforeseen labor market disruptions, some of the strikes that we've seen that have led consumers to be concerned about things like delivery timelines. I think they're getting PTSD to when during COVID they couldn't get their goods on time. But also, of course, terrible disruptions related to some of the weather events that we've had recently as well, has folks just concerned about the Fed's potentially reducing rates at a slower pace. The second thing that we have here are geopolitical conflicts. We don't need to go into this terribly much, but again, this is going to play into the average consumer's concern about increasing inflation. Third, credit card debt is at a record high. This is, of course, going to come with it more value shopping behavior and concerns around how consumers spend the limited dollars that they may have this year. And finally, election years always bring uncertainty across the board. And in volatile moments, there's always trepidation in terms of spending. Within the last couple of days, Rakuten released some very interesting data that is the culmination of a study that we conducted with the Harris poll, which showed two very fascinating disconnects between how consumers intend to plan their spending this year versus how retailers are preparing to engage with shoppers this holiday season. And I think this is probably one of the most critical takeaways that you can get out of today's presentation, because the data here might really help you set up your retailers to ensure they're stepping out from the pack and not just following the same playbook as last year. Before we get into what this data showed, you'll all remember that since the pandemic, the shopping season has been moving earlier and earlier. Typically we think of Amazon Prime Day in October being now the starting point of the holiday shopping season, where previously it was always thought to be more in line with Singles Day. However, last year was a bit of a different turn, where the majority of brands decided that they were going to wait to spend the majority of their promotional dollars to the back half of November and early December. Some of them didn't, and some of them started those promotions early, thinking that we might have a very similar season. And what did happen actually was that most consumers waited last year. Most consumers realized that they were probably going to get the most bang for their buck waiting for Cyber Week last year. And those brands who did pull forward promotions and ad spend into October and early November, many of them saw margin loss, because a lot of the shopping was to do with not with gifting, but rather with just average day-to-day purchases that then those retailers ended up giving away discounts and margin on that they wouldn't have otherwise had to, since those products would have otherwise been bought anyway. However, this is a different year, and very many retailers are not necessarily understanding that this is a different year. What we found through our study with the Harris poll is that the vast majority of shoppers this year will spend the same or less than last year. In fact, 81% of shoppers will spend the same or less than last year. And given that, they told us directly that they still need the same amount of gifts. So they intend to prioritize value over brand loyalty. If you think about that in juxtaposition to what the retailers believe, only 20% of retailers believe that that's true. Shocking, right? 80% of retailers believe that brand loyalty will be retained this year without having to do too terribly much to shore it up. So that's the first really big disconnect here, is that you have consumers telling us that value will supersede loyalty and retailers aren't terribly concerned about it. The second big disconnect, which also very much goes in tandem with that point, is that timing is absolutely critical this holiday. So the first thing here is that consumers, their primary concern this year is that they believe that inflation will increase post-election day. It has nothing to do with who they think will win. They just fundamentally believe that even though inflation has been on a downward trend, that post-election inflation and prices will increase. That is the first point that is driving them to shop early, specifically before election day. The second thing is that your average consumer has been hearing a lot about port strikes. And again, they're probably having PTSD to when they had trouble getting their goods back during the pandemic. So this is their number two biggest concern in terms of being able to get their goods on time. These two things together mean that shoppers are out there now looking for the value per the first point that they are willing to pull the trigger on if it's not, even if it's not a brand that they normally shop, as long as they feel that they're getting some incentive at a price point that they believe is lower than it will be post-election. Because to them, to the consumer, if they believe that prices will go up after the election, it won't matter if a brand is giving 20% cash back or is having a 10% site-wide sale if prices have gone up dramatically. So they would rather put their bets on spending the dollars now and getting the value, the perceived value that they think will come out of lower prices now, matched with brands who are in market playing with some incentives, whether they be cash back incentives or promotional moments now prior to election. So the bottom line is those advertisers who show up early are going to win this year. And what we're seeing so far is that 80% of them seem to be playing from the same playbook as last year. So if you take away anything from this today, you have some really vital data in your pocket now to go to your retailers and try to convince them why getting into the game early is going to pull forward finite demand in a way that didn't happen last year. So now let's move on to what Rakuten believes are our 6 Q4 predictions and how that actually ties to strategies related to their work and your work with Rakuten. Until now, we've really just been talking more about what's going on in the industry with retailers and consumers and not necessarily how that ties to tactics. So this section will get us a little bit more into what can you recommend to your brands and retailers now that you have a better sense of what to expect this holiday. So the first one here, which is related to the value-seeking concept, is that the trade down is back. That when people are in a point of uncertainty and are looking for value, they're very likely to trade down to a value brand versus a brand that they may have previously been loyal to. But our findings show that this is more pertinent to certain categories than others. For example, luxury shoppers. 25% of the average luxury shopper of shoppers who purchased from luxury brands in the first half of 2023 traded down to value stores this year. So this is important because luxury is one of those categories that always previously seemed immune from the trade down, but no longer is that the case. They have some of their shoppers who are aging out. They have some of their shoppers who are just concerned about inflation and about the economic moment during tumultuous times. And then you just have a lot of younger shoppers who are interested in luxury brands, but really need that permission to shop in order to do so. Similarly, you have home and garden shoppers who are very likely to choose a value brand if there's something that is enticing to them that seems more of a value to them than the brand that they worked with before. Similarly, toys and games, as well as electronics. That one's not terribly surprising because of the high price point associated with electronics. We're absolutely going to see quite a lot of trading down happening in that space. But then on the flip side of that, you have some categories like baby care brands or pet care brands or even beauty, where there's a slightly less of a willingness to move toward more value brands and to be a little bit more brand loyal. I don't think that that changes the holistic trend that we're going to be in a year of value seeking over brand loyalty. But this is an interesting set of data points to choose from as you're talking specifically to your different categories and brands in those categories. So the Rakuten strategy that we would suggest here is that if you're worried about trade down, which you should be, brands really need to be investing right now before we hit prime time in finding new to file shoppers who perhaps have affinity in their category but haven't purchased with them before. Finding those shoppers who haven't purchased with them, say in the last 6 months, and finding a way to incentivize them to make a purchase now so that they're shored up for when those big promotions happen during Cyber Week. And similarly to the new to file concept, but more generally, targeting category or affinity data pools in order to get more shoppers within your category to be loyal to you before going into Prime Holiday. If we think back to the two core discrepancies that the Harris Poll survey outcome showed us, I think regardless of how many brands were collectively able to convince to move their promotional dollars forward this year, if we're starting with 80% of brands with this very high level of confidence that they can hit their sales goals by just focusing on promotional timing in the back half of November and early December, can you imagine how competitive it's going to be? It's going to be a flurry of discounts. It's going to be very hard for brands to stand out, perhaps unprecedentedly hard for them to stand out. So consumers will win regardless, in my opinion, but these sorts of strategies really help to shore up brand loyalty in a year where that's going to be a concern. Second prediction is that political ads have been dominating and are going to create another interesting position that brands are in come late November as well, which is to say that political ads have made search and social very, very expensive over the last couple of months. So many brands have not been able to play in those arenas, especially when it comes to new customer acquisition on those channels. So they've saved money. That money needs to go somewhere because they still need to deliver the same amount of sales that they did last year, if not likely more. So I do believe that we have an opportunity to divert a good chunk of those dollars to things like cashback and media placements to help stand out from the crowd during a very busy and competitive November. We'll also likely see early November, like from the beginning of November through Election Day, be pretty quiet. Now, most brands and retailers don't want to stand out too much during that time. So again, another moment where there are big dollars being saved that still need to be comped year over year. So very much encourage having early conversations with your retailers and brands now about being a really smart place, cashback, media being a really smart place that is fundamentally immune to the political landscape, because that's not an area that we play in. So they can use those dollars to actually tie to performance in this channel. It's a very smart way to divert that spend. The third trend is that this is likely to be a critical year for omni-channel shopping. As many of you know, Rakuten has a card-linked offer program where consumers are able to go in and link their cards to brands who are participating on Rakuten's in-store network. So a brand like CVS, for instance, may offer in-store cashback. A consumer can link their card to that CVS offer on our app, and then when they go use that credit card in CVS, they get cashback just the same way that they would had they shopped CVS online. That portion of Rakuten's business has gone up 44% year over year. That shows you a couple of things. One, that this idea that, delivery timing has been in the mind of shoppers all year long and is only going to get more prevalent as we go into later Q4. So any in-store shopping alleviates that concern for sure, but they still want their value. And the other thing is that younger shoppers, 81% of Gen Z and 73% of millennials actually prefer to shop in physical stores. There is very much a movement toward quality, and there's so much happening online, especially in social channels, so many D2C brands that it's very hard to decipher what quality is without getting your hands on it. So there is a movement of younger shoppers shopping in store as well. So the strategy here is that any of your retailers who have brick and mortar locations, please do encourage them to sign up for Rakuten's card-linked offer or in-store network, as well as any other publishers who may have something similar. Fourth prediction is that holiday shoppers are waiting for the deal, not the day. We've already talked a lot about this, that they're going to pull the trigger on deals, especially deals before Election Day this year. But even looking back at prior years where we didn't have this unique election moment and concern around inflation, you can see here 71% of Q4 shoppers still make a purchase before Black Friday. And Black Friday and Cyber Mondays, they're going nowhere. These are still Cyber Week is still an incredibly important time. But the idea that we don't work to capture the dollars that are being spent by shoppers before Black Friday is a fool's errand, both in terms of losing those sales as well as losing an opportunity to shore up state of mind in terms of market share and being top of mind for the shoppers that you want to continue to shop with you come Cyber Week. Fifth prediction is that there are intentions to splurge and expectations of quality for those brands that consumers are still interested in splurging on. We talked a little bit about this already, but Gen Z and millennials in particular really value quality. And they will spend if they feel the quality is there and that they have some incentive or some value to pull the trigger. And we're seeing this in that, of course, still a lot of resale. Resale is the largest, of course, area where younger consumers are getting luxury goods. However, there is an increase in younger consumers shopping directly with luxury brands, whether that's with categories like beauty that have been carved off to have slightly lower price points than, say, leather goods. But even with the very high price point items, these younger shoppers are starting to develop that level of brand loyalty directly with these high-end brands, but only if they have some sort of incentive to do so. Of course, on the flip side of that, high-end luxury brands, discount is a dirty word, so they don't want to give discounts. But whether it's a high-end luxury brand or even just a luxury brand of kind of a lower tier, considering cash back as this permission to buy at full price is a critical way to be positioning an incentive versus a price. And that is really critical. There's many brands, whether it's concern around their brand valuation or their own internal margins, that really can't use price or discounting as a lever so much. But cash back, kind of more as a advertising mechanism coming out of the advertising pool of dollars specifically, can often be a way to do that, a way to retain the brand value of full price while giving an incentive for shoppers to buy. And finally, when value is king, cashback is the answer. Hopefully, I don't need to talk too much to you guys because you're all experts around how to work with Rakuten these days around cashback. But we're going to quickly fly through the different ways that you can use cashback, because over the last four-ish years, the malleability of cashback to tie to your brand and retailer objectives has gone through the roof. It's no longer just about generating top line sales, which certainly you can, and the holidays are often about, but using cashback as a lever to generate more strategic outcomes like acquisition and re-engagement and second and third purchases, or incentivizing a purchase on another category after an initial purchase is made. Cashback can be targeted to individuals, to products, to categories in a very surgical way. And that's something that I want to make sure that you're all thinking about as we go into the back half of this year as well. So I'll show you a little bit of data as well as our quick a reminder on our cashback playbook, which is always the same year over year unless things change dramatically. First thing here speaks to the importance of titrating cashback. So you'll often get, and we get a lot of comments around, hey, I don't have the budget to be at this high cashback rate all the time. And we say, good, because you shouldn't be. That doesn't work. So what we've found and what you can see here is that those brands who move cash back up and down, fluctuate it with regularity so they keep consumers on their toes, see dramatically more both spend and trips than those retailers and brands who keep a static cash back rate. And surprisingly, that static cash back rate can sometimes be a higher cash back rate than those who are using cashback dynamicism. So this is an important one to keep in mind in terms of a way to achieve your retailer's margin and budget concerns and take advantage of the consumer behavior that we know happens on Rakuten. Your Rakuten cashback playbook. First of all, prime the pump now. If we haven't said this enough, not only should they always be thinking about shoring up the most possible shoppers they can to be brand loyal to them in advance of holiday, that's obviously more important now than ever when you have shoppers out there looking to make as many purchases as they can prior to election. The second one is flexing higher cash back rates. This really speaks to the importance of consistently moving the cash back rate around and doing so either with our promo calendar, which helps because we're also giving a lot of free publicity and media when we're hosting promos that we don't when a brand just decides to pulse cash back higher on their own, but both have a place, both are important. 3 is double down on media. Of course, Rakuten, we have many options from on-site placements to push notifications to emails and category placements and so forth that brands can buy. And we affectionately say that it's your invite to the party. That truly, if you just elevate cash back on its own and you don't buy media associated with it, it's like having a party without sending out the invitations. Boo, no one's going to come. So if they're having this moment where they're elevating cash back rates, encourage them to double down on media, especially when we're going to be entering what we know is going to be maybe the most competitive back half of November from a promotional standpoint and an advertising spend standpoint than we've had in a while. Fourth one is investing in anchors and champion buyer events. Now, just very quickly, these are Rakuten terminologies. So anchor events are like our tentpole events. These are events like Black Friday, Cyber Monday, Cyber Tuesday, and so forth. So obviously, these are moments that we've trained the consumers to come shop with us. So if brands choose to not be in those moments for whatever reason, that's a huge moment of loss in market share. Champion buyer events are additional add-on events that we have in tandem with our big anchor tentpole moments where we enable opportunities for brands and retailers to offer a even higher cashback rate to a subset of our audience that we consider champion buyers. Those are our most loyal, most highest average order value, highest frequency shoppers. So the idea here is that if you're offering 15% to everybody on Black Friday, why not offer 20% to these guys? Because that'll, these are the prime of the prime shoppers that you want to get over your competition. And because it's a smaller pool of shoppers, it doesn't crush a budget the way it would if that 20% was given to everybody. Number 5 is bookending the anchor moments. So as you saw on that previous slide where you saw purchases happening both before and after Cyber Week, it's always really critical to think about encouraging your retailers and brands to invest in some way both before and after these moments, because these are really unfortunately, too many retailers don't take advantage of re-engaging shoppers after they have engaged with them. And shoppers are still in market. They are in market until the very end of December. So really think about encouraging the bookending of anchor moments to ride the wave, if you will. And finally, delivering on an omni-channel experience. I think we've talked about this enough in terms of in-store and why this is particularly important from a shopper behavior standpoint this year. But if that is something that if delivering cash back on in-store purchases is not something that your retailers are ready to do for some reason, you should definitely still consider encouraging them to do something like tiering out buy online, pick up in store at a higher cash back rate, especially after shipping cutoffs occur, to make certain that they're getting as much of the spend as they can through the very end of the year. As we talk about the idea of priming the pump, this is just a great visual for you. to see what are those opportunities in advance of Cyber Week. So as you bring this concept to your merchants around shoppers out there shopping now, here are your best opportunities from a promotional standpoint to get market share before the big time happens. Flexing higher cash back rates. We always want to root our recommendations in data here. So to meet consumer demand and the expectations around the deal seeking that we know is going to happen, we are recommending that brands really consider fluctuating cash back versus staying static. You can see on the left-hand side here, again, those stats related to the spend and trips that increase for brands who titrate cash back versus stay static. And then on the right here is kind of your tool, an example, if you will, how you might look at a calendar and plan out where and when you may want to use targeted cashback increases or blanket promotional cashback increases to shore up and make sure that you're getting the most out of Cyber 5 and then cleaning up as much as you can on the back end once that's over. Tying to our point on doubling down on media, you can see here that our media solutions do perform and drive significantly more trips, buyers, and orders holistically than those brands who just participate in cashback increases alone. If this is data that interests you and you want more of it, maybe category specific, please don't hesitate to reach out to myself or my team. We're always more than happy to pull real-time data for you. And then investing in anchor and champion buyer events. You can see here very clearly this continuum, if you will, of brands who have less promotional participations and lower cash back. If you look at what happens to their year-over-year metrics in sales, trips, orders, buyers, and new to files, that new to file number, obviously super critical, that then when they participate in just simply more promotions year over year, you see a nice increase in sales, certainly a nice increase in trips, orders, and buyers, and a nominal increase in new to files. It's always good to have an increase, but it's not terribly exciting. When you have more promotions and higher cash back rate than you did last year, because those consumers remember, they remember. Now you start to see some really big changes across all of the core metrics. And by the way, when we say higher cash back, it doesn't have to be a huge amount. It could be 1 or 2 points higher. And that makes a difference to the consumer who remembers last year's rates and feels excited by what they're getting this year to make that purchase now. But finally, those who participate in regular promotions, higher cash back, but also participate in the big anchor events and the champion buyer events with higher cash back rates. Now this new to file number becomes really exciting. And I think that many believe that it's just kind of table stakes maybe to participate in anchor events like Black Friday and Cyber Monday, but it isn't just table stakes. It's actually one of the best opportunities to get new to file shoppers where those shoppers are looking for value over brand loyalty. So if your brands aren't in those promotions, their shoppers are going to find someone else to shop with. And finally, just a quick case study for you. We had a brand last year with whom we worked on this very similar playbook, and they went from very static, low cash back rate, very limited participation in the year prior. And they decided, hey, let's just go whole hog and do this strategy to a T and participate in events to capture early shoppers. They bookended anchor events and had elevated cash back in media before and after big tentpole events. They fluctuated their cash back dynamically throughout the season. They pulsed to higher cashback rates than they had the prior year once in a while. And they also layered on media, specifically high impact placements like solo emails and the promoted store tiles, to make sure that when they were spiking cashback higher than LY, that they were moments that were being seen by as many shoppers as possible to steal as much market share as they could. And then those results on the right really speak for themselves. These are dramatic increases across all of the metrics that matter, and really show you that this playbook works. And having now gone through what we believe is likely to happen from a consumer standpoint behaviorally this year, this cashback playbook is more important than ever. So bottom line is, let's get started. Hopefully this was a really helpful and informative way to give you some fodder, some data to bring to your retailers and brands to elevate their strategy for this year, and even give them some detail, some data that they can funnel upward if they're looking to sell in some concepts to their CMOs, for instance. But we're really excited about what this year is going to bring. And I think that regardless, we're all going to win, especially in a year of value seekers. But let's do it the best and most efficiently and effectively as we can for our retailers. So thank you all for your time today, and look forward to working with you all through the end of the year and beyond.